Hi everyone. It's been a while since I recorded a video, but now that the heat is off, we're back to temperatures I can manage. It makes this a bit easier. I wanted to speak about how there's this perception that what I speak about will only result in, the government, coming in and blowing up the place and destroying what we create and that kind of stuff. And this has to do with how we navigate that. If or when people do that without doing their due diligence, yeah, it's possible that can happen, because people are serfs of the king, and when they walk away from their duties to the king and go out and start providing for themselves, they're being disobedient, and the king has every right to restore obedience and order for those who are being disobedient. However, when we end that relationship properly, we're no longer being disobedient because the relationship is ended. So now we are standing in spiritual jurisdiction instead of the king's jurisdiction and governing ourselves. And as such, the king has no jurisdiction and no interest in restoring order, because there's no order to restore. And this is an important differentiation to make, and is why I feel that the king has always left me alone. Even when I was building on quote-unquote crown land and living there, I did my due diligence. I removed myself from being a serf to the king, and I even challenged his claims on the land too, to the point where they had to acknowledge, yep, we send you your best wishes, because that's all they can do at that point. There's lots of people out there who are freedom fighters, and they're fighting for freedom. Fighting is an act of war, and there's no freedom in war. The irony here is that we have to peace for freedom, not fight for it. And we do that by correcting our relationships and restoring ourselves to proper standing. And what that means is that, like the work I've done is to put myself into a position where I properly ended those abusive, violent relationships and embrace spirit, embrace Creator as my master, and stand in spiritual jurisdiction instead of fictional jurisdictions. I'm not interested in going to war. I'm not interested in fighting the system or any of that kind of stuff. This is about me being true to myself and exploring who I am. And part of that process is to do the healing, which is why the Sacred Heart Circles are so important. Because if I allow myself to get triggered by what other people are saying or doing, then I'm not standing in my truth, and instead sometimes react and go to war, which is what they want. They're pushing and poking and prodding to get people to react and then say, oh, you're violent, and then they can justify their violence to shut you down. But if I can heal so that I don't react to that abusive behavior, but instead know how to respond to it properly and peacefully, then I don't get dragged onto the battlefield. And that is why the work is so important, because that's me building my own personal container. How I govern myself, how I navigate these relationships so that I don't get triggered and go to war and end up fighting And that's why that personal container took me years, sometimes decades, to figure out and establish so I can navigate this properly, which then put me in a position to be able to hold containers and build containers for Divine Feminine. And now, to work with other men to build tribal containers so that we can actually build something that can provide peace and safety for people, even though safety is an illusion. If we can build something where people can at least feel comfortable and be vulnerable without being attacked or judged or violated, then those are the types of containers that we need to build, so that we can build something that replaces what the system has claimed that they're building, but has never and will never be able to accomplish, because that's not their goal, that's not their objective. Their objective is to harvest souls and people and energy, and they'll do that by any means necessary through their greed and corruption. And I'm not interested in being abused by people like that, but I'm not going to fight them. I will walk away, and I will end relationships so that I can connect with what's truly resonating in my heart, and that is to build these containers so that we have a place to explore healthy relationships and step into my spiritual jurisdiction and steward the land how we're supposed to be doing it, and not being enslaved by these fictional constructs. So I'm not going to fight for that. I'm not going to go to war for freedom, but I am going to peace for it, and I'm going to work hard at it. And I have my boundaries, and I have certain protocols that I'm going to use, and ceremonies, and ideas on what I feel healthy relationships are all about, to be able to build that level of freedom, not only in my life, but in the lives of those around me as well too. And so, and I know, like, when I do that, they leave me alone because I'm not in their jurisdiction. They don't have jurisdiction over me. And it's like the post I wrote yesterday, if you want to get away from the controls of the globalists, then walk away from the control of the king, because the king has essentially usurped all of his authority to the globalists through treaties and that sort of thing. And people don't have any control over that, but they have control over whether they decide to participate in it or not. And I know it's scary, and I know it's a bit overwhelming to contemplate walking away from the king, walking away from the system. But the system is designed for control and slavery, and it's going to destroy itself. And so I'm encouraging people to find alternatives, and the alternative I'm exploring is to heal and learn how to build these containers so that I can restore our tribes and be able to build space for people to prosper and feel like they're connected to something, protected by something, and nourished by that group of people that's around them in a healthy way. So yeah, if people have questions, let me know. Thank you for listening, and I pray you're all well, and have a beautiful day, and hopefully see you in the next day or two. Thanks for checking out my videos.